Hello everyone, I am Psychobolic, your envoy of hope, and welcome back to what I watched this week. This week I started off with Wakaokami wa Shougakusei, or The Young Mistress is a Grade Schooler. When a young girl's parents die in a car crash, she ends up moving in with her grandma, and has the ability to see ghosts, and a ghost prods her until she agrees to take over the inn from her grandma, and she begins training to be an innkeeper. It's a cute little show made for what I assume to be children. The show is organized into a series of small arcs that are all around 3 episodes each, which kind of surprised me because usually shows of this length, with this episode length, I should say, don't generally have arcs. But this one actually had several arcs. Some were better than others. One I really appreciated was the arc where, with the fortune teller, and the one where the young girl was talking to her sister, and they're in Taiwan, and they're trying to take over from their grandma's inn. But I was also surprised that the show was willing to actually get into the implications of the ghost children, and they actually talk about how the kids died. The show has its flaws, but all in all, I thought it was a pretty fun time. Then I watched Cutie Honey Universe. This is another attempt at the Cutie Honey series created by Go Nagai, which could be seen as sort of the progenitor of the modern Magical Girl series. Supposedly, the Cutie Honey Universe is closest to the manga of any of the previous adaptations, and from what I know of Go Nagai's work, I'd believe it. It has a kind of a similar feel that Devilman Crybaby had. Characters die in mass, and there's rampant sexuality in it. I did appreciate the kind of the art direction, honestly, with the colors and the animation, and on some of the sound design, even. It did have its moments where characters looked and kind of came off as like 70s anime characters, but I guess that's to be expected based on the source material. Cutie Honey is about a robot cyborg girl that is, because of her father, forced to fight a group of women turned into animals by roses by a lady called Sister Jill. Most of the cast was pretty likable, with the exception of the 2 comic relief characters, go figure. And about the halfway point, it actually took a surprisingly dark turn where everyone started fucking dying, and you got to see Honey go like further and further into almost depression as she struggles to with her feelings, and she begins to get more and more of a drive to take out Sister Jill and Panther Claw. And it's surprisingly compelling, and at the end of the series, everyone dresses up as Honey and does a dance number, which is just the best. I've seen people, like, talk about that being like, that's fucking dumb, but I'm like, no, that's fucking amazing. So yeah, really enjoyed Cutie Honey Universe. Anyway, after that, I got to Hataraku Saibou, Cells at Work. Cells at Work is a pretty simple to understand series. Basically, it just anthropomorphizes the cells and various organisms and bacteria, etc., in your body, and uses that as a method to basically explain human biology to you. The first several episodes especially come off as mostly a biology lesson and is not particularly interesting, but surprisingly, as the series goes on, it begins to actually delve more into the characters and begins to establish them better and develop their relationships. Like, there's even 2 background episodes for characters, which was extra surprising. And even though it ends up with, like, a slow start, by the end, you end up really liking the characters. And when things start going down at the end, I actually felt myself like, come on, guys, you can make it through this. And, you know, of course they do. But it's still good that it was able to elicit that kind of feeling in me. Finally, I ended with Shoujo Kageki Revue Starlight. Now, I could go on for 10 minutes, probably, maybe even more, about why Revue Starlight fucking sucks. But instead, I'm going to try and, minimize it and just talk about a few key points. See, Revue Starlight starts with a character who once made a promise to an old friend of hers that they would both stand on the same stage and do a play together, and then the friend moves away, but then she comes back to her school, and they're both going to the same performing arts school, and then the main character stumbles her way into a magical, theatrical combat arena overseen by a wish-granting giraffe where they fight in stage combat. And one of my major issues with the show is at no point do they explain or justify the existence of the magical wish-granting giraffe in stage combat. It just kind of happens and you have to take it at face value, which is super annoying. And then there's the stage combat itself. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed the theatrical fights, although they do get significantly worse as the series goes on. But the early ones were actually really entertaining and interesting. The problem is, the show itself doesn't really justify the existence of these fights, because they're used to kind of tell the stories about relationships between the characters and what they're going through and working through their own issues. But the issues these characters are facing are not very interesting or compelling, and so it doesn't warrant such an over-the-top theatrical display. Instead, these displays are actually wasted on this show when they could be used to tell better stories. Now, if my only issues with the show were that they essentially wasted their over-the-top fights and it wasn't engaging or compelling and was incredibly boring, it probably wouldn't have drawn as much ire from me. But my biggest issue with the show is probably that it could have been more interesting, other than the ending, which I don't want to spoil, is that they introduce a character that they kind of set up to be a villain. Because you find out that one of the girls has not only competed in the Revue, which is the stage battles they're fighting in, before, but she's actually competed in the same battle with these same girls countless times and has used her wish from the magic wish-granting giraffe to reset time over and over until both her and the giraffe have actually forgotten how many times they have repeated this same year. And she makes this declaration straight to the camera. She just looks right into the camera that she's not going to let anything change. And you get the idea that's like, oh my god, is something interesting going to happen? We have an actual antagonist and she's resetting time. How are they going to beat her? And the answer is, it doesn't matter, because she loses next episode. Literally, one episode. They introduce this character, they establish her story and her motivation, and then they just discard her. And it just makes her whole character completely pointless. It makes the whole episode you just went through completely pointless, and you just end up leaving the show wondering why the fuck you had to sit through any of that, and what made them feel like this was a story worth telling. Because I don't think Revue Starlight was worth telling, and I feel like what the show did do right and what it did set up right was completely wasted by what the show ended up actually accomplishing by the end of it. So in summation, fucking Shoujo Kageki Revue Starlight fucking sucks. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope, position 0.